Good morning, everyone. If you could confirm you're hearing me through the chat line, I'd appreciate. Thank you, Kelly. A couple more of you, please, just so I know it's clear through to everyone. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much on that. Okay, not much in the way of comments to begin with for today, but we'll move quickly after that into working end of chapter problems. The first thing, though, I want to talk a little bit about is the marking guideline that I use, referred sometimes as a rubric. And to do that, I'll share my screen with you. You should now see that screen. If for some reason you cannot see it, entitled Engineering Economics Exams, I'll assume you can see that unless you tell me to the otherwise in the chat line. The meeting's being recorded, so you're aware of that. And I just want to spend a minute or two so you're well aware of this. This gives you the indication of how I will mark the questions. So I'm just going to go through this for your information. It's posted in Learn under Content, so you should have access to it, and it would be smart maybe to print a copy of that off and have it beside you as you answer the questions, because these are the key lines I will look for in the work that you're providing to me. And of course, if these lines are not there, you won't receive a mark for that. So the first thing up under the first item, the first bullet within the first item, if a cash flow diagram is asked for, and if it is complete, meaning all the cash flow elements are on it, and it is correct in that regard, the receipts are shown properly, the disbursements are shown properly, the annuities, the single amounts, arithmetic gradient series, as well as geometric gradient series are also shown, then in those cases, you would receive the 1 mark. It doesn't have to be drawn to scale generally, but you should be aware that the neater it is, the easier it is for me to appreciate what it contains. Also along there, if it's necessary to compute a sub-period interest rate or an effective interest rate, that also will yield 1 mark. Sometimes the question will give it to you. You'll already have a sub-period rate or an effective rate. So if that's not necessary, of course, there'd be no mark awarded for that. And the last one is if you're using linear interpolation in any of your problems where it's allowed, then if that's the case, you would receive 1 mark for an accurate linear interpolation graph. So that's potentially 3 sources of marks there. Moving on a little bit, if for each segment in the solution to a question or to a problem where you're required compound interest factors are necessary from the tables, this is the layout I'd expect. You'd put in there your factor formula that would contain that, using very basic ones here. In the examples on this sheet, I'm just simply dealing with a future value having been given a present value as a way of demonstrating this. But you would show the actual formula. That would be worth 1 mark. Another one would be awarded for putting the correct values into that formula. And then another mark for putting more values, if you will, into that formula that shows your what would I call it here? Your factor that you extracted from the tables. And then lastly, whether it takes 1 step or 2 or 3 steps to get there, you'd get 1 mark for your final answer. If by chance you're not using or you cannot use the tables, you still need to start out that way. You get 1 mark for each of the following for the factor statement, then recognizing that the factor statement is not applicable because you do not have an I value or an N value in the tables that you have to work with. Then you would have to substitute in the actual prime formula. And by doing that, you would receive 1 mark. Then putting the values into that prime formula would be 1 more mark. And finally, whether it takes 1 or 2 or more steps for the final answer. So each kind of segment like that, whether we're dealing with item 2 or 3, represents the potential for 4 marks in a question. Now, in the event you're not really dealing with a cash flow scenario, excuse me, and you're just using a formula, and that most often occurs when you're dealing with depreciation as an example. There may be others, but again, the prime formula is what I look for there. Then the correct values being put into that prime formula, and then the solution that you work. Now that could occur for a straight line depreciation or a declining balance depreciation. That's the example I put in here. But it would be worth a package of 3 marks on doing that. And finally, if the question asks you for a concluding or a decision statement, then that would be worth 1 mark. It has to not just be a statement, it must also contain the correct answer, of course. So those are that is the guideline. And that's what we'll hear. Fabian is today, oh, quiet, sorry. But anyway, I'll answer it this way. Yes, the quiz for today, which I'll speak about here very shortly, and I'll touch on that point for everyone. Okay, so that wraps that up. That's just something I wanted to show that you are aware of it. I usually do it as we get into chapter 3. So these points that can that will these lines of work will receive a mark. They don't make a lot of sense at the end of chapter 1 or a lot of at the end of chapter 2, but they now do because you've been exposed to using the tables, or in the event the tables are not applicable or maybe not workable, then of course you would turn your attention to using the prime formulas. So that's what we have there. I'm going to stop sharing that right now and go back to my main screen. The lecture is being recorded. I can't remember if I mentioned that or not. I may have. In any event, do you have any questions? And I'll look forward in the chat line, or you can come on with your audio channel, but any questions about the exam rubric that I'll be using? Again, at the risk of repeating this, it's probably clever to make a printed copy of that and have it beside you as you go through your work. And again, it's posted in Learn under content. Okay, I don't see any question. What time does the midterm? I believe, although I have yet to put it together, it'll probably be 1 o'clock. I just had to make a change for the quiz today because of a conflict I have, and I couldn't work my way around it. So most of my quizzes and exams will start at 1 o'clock. The exception, any exceptions to that, or even when that is the case, I do my best to announce it through an email sent to the class, everyone in the class, although you get it as an individual because we send blind copies out that way. Okay, the midterm, you want a question on that? Sure. There's Haven't decided, I haven't made it up yet, but from past experience, you can expect somewhere between 8, 9, or 10 questions, depending upon their complexity. And the time duration will be 2 hours. And it will be all calculations for the midterm exam. I will not go back to theory questions. Of course, you have to understand the theory to apply it in the questions. So don't ignore the theory as you go through the course textbook, but I won't ask questions like there are on the quiz. I usually cover my theory in the quizzes and let it be at that. So you can expect 8, 9, possibly 10 questions that will require some level of calculations. Some may be a little longer than others. Some will be a little shorter than others. So answers that. The quiz, I believe I've spoken to one of the other questions that came in on a private line to me here. And yes, for today, no, I want to put it this way here. For today's quiz, it will be on theory. So there's no calculations involved. That doesn't mean there wouldn't be a number in the question. It just simply means you shouldn't have to delve into calculations that perhaps couldn't be done in your head, if that were the case. So it's pretty straightforward stuff in that regard. Okay, let me just look at some of this stuff here now. Yeah, that covers it. I want to close this down. And I want to bring up my document camera now. Let me just check my notes here before I do that. The quiz today is at 11:30. As you're all aware, I see I have a note to that effect to announce it again. So you'll have 15 minutes to access the quiz, and the timing on it is 25 minutes. So hopefully everything goes well there. And it's multiple choice like the previous 2 quizzes. You can't see it yet in Learn. I typically don't unhide them, if you will, or let them be seeable until a few minutes before the quiz time is when I tend to. That gives me one last chance to take a quick look at the material to see if everything is properly set up with its parameters to be undertaken. So I want to start now with problem 3.9 as an end of chapter problem. And I need to open up my textbook here. Bear with me, please. 3.9. Okay, 3.9, you should have your book open and viewing that now. There's an A part and I see a B part, so we'll take a look at it. For A part, so 3.9A, I perhaps could put that up here. And I'm going to draw the cash flow diagram on that. How much is accumulated over 2 years in each of the following savings plans? So this is an amount of money that's going into a bank account. Although it's your bank account, you have essentially put it into the hands of a bank or a credit union or some other financial institute where you can have an account that earns you money. So from our perspective, that is a disbursement as the money flows out. It's leaving your pocket, it's leaving your hands and going into the bank as a disbursement. The bank now will use that money. They will make money off of your money, some of which will be returned to you. The balance, of course, the bank keeps. They're in business as well. So from this, we can pretty well surmise that we're going to run this. It's for 2 years. So I'm going to do that here. And
Hey, Wayne, can you share?
oh, I am sorry. Yes, I can. I'm sorry. Where am I here? Share. Apologize for that. Okay, you should now see that. If you cannot, please tell me so. It would have EOC 3.9A in the top right-hand corner. Thank you, Kelly. Just want to bring my chat line up, whatever. Okay. So you see there in red the cash flow, and it says it's start of the cash flow diagram. I often use cash flow diagram here as a just for my own abbreviated reference. It's going to be 2 years according to this. And in item A of 3.9, $40 at the end of each month for 24 months. Okay, well, that's an annuity. It's the same amount of money over the same interval of time, monthly. So what I'm going to do here is show it this way. And this is a disbursement because it's going into the hands of the bank. It's leaving you. How much is it? Well, it says it's $40 per month. And the interest rate that we've been given here, I, is 12% compounded monthly. Okay, so we're going to proceed here. We could calculate, again, a problem of this nature can be solved with IE or IS. The question is, which is the straightforward way to go, or which is the easiest way to go? Well, this is a nominal interest rate, so we can't work with 12%. We've got to go with IS or IE, and it would make sense to go with IS because it's easy to convert your term from 2 years to months simply by multiplying by 12. And this already is in months. And if we convert it to IS, it'll be monthly. So IS will be equal to the nominal interest rate, R over M, equal to, and I'll leave it all as a percentage here, 12% over 12 equals to 1% per month. So the interest rate we're working with, sub-period, is monthly. Our deposits into that bank account is monthly. So we're going to now convert the years to months, 24. So as far as the formula goes in this case, we're looking, and I'll just pose the rhetorical question so you're thinking this way. What are we looking for here? We have an annuity that's being paid out or being deposited into this account, but the question is saying how much is accumulated over 2 years. That's a future value. So we're solving for F, future value. Some people might write F V for future value. Some people might write just F. Others might even write future worth, FW. It's immaterial to me. You're covering the bases adequately by going this route. So we know that it's going to be worked to where the future value is going to be equal to that annuity that we've been given. And that annuity, the factor formula would be what is F, the future value, if we know that annuity, which we do know, $40. I, we know that, and N, the interval, the duration, if you will. So it's going to be compounded 24 times is what it's going to be done at 1% per month. That's what it translates into. So we have that. So for our next line of work here, what is the annuity? It's $40. FA remains notation. I is 1%. N is 24. Moving on, that is $40 onto, and we're going to turn our attention now to the tables. So I'll give you a moment, maybe one or two of you can put up the proper factor for that. This is basically, and again, I tend to use these little notations here. I'm looking for the column in the tables that says FAIN. However, if you want to go by the name of it, it's referred to as a uniform series factor. You don't need to write that down. You just have to know that you're and feel confident that you're looking the answer up under the right column. So do I have any reflection on what that value is? 26,973 works for me. So 26, my mistake there, it's not a comma, it's a decimal. $26.973, which will be equal to $1,078.92. Often at the end of the book, when you're doing these questions, just so you're aware of it, they sometimes just round off to the nearest dollar. I tend to carry it through to show the exact pennies on it as well. So that would be all you'd have to do. So a question like that, at the risk of repeating what I've done before, you'd get one for a properly executed or properly presented cash flow diagram. In this case, we had to do a conversion, so there'd be 1 mark for that. Down here, you get a mark for the factor formula with the factor formula parameters filled in, the balance of the information by extracting out of the tables the correct factor, and then here. In this case, probably I would not ask for a concluding statement. It's pretty obvious to me. There's no decision to be made, and it's a pretty straightforward solution. So with that in mind, you would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 marks for that question. Out of this, my exams tend to total somewhere between 60 and 75 marks in total, just depending upon the complexity of the questions and the number of questions, of course. So that'll give you some insight into that. Now, let's look at part B here. I'll keep them on separate pages. It just serves my purpose later. So I'm going to now do EOC 3.9B. So once again, this is a separate question. Do not rely on the cash flow diagram with separate components of a question. You need to take each component of the question and treat it as if it stands alone. So you'd need a cash flow diagram here again. Only in this case, it'll be a different cash flow diagram anyway. So we have our timeline. Again, it's 2 years. We're looking for a future value in 2 years. And in this case, we're going to be making a deposit of $30 at the end of the first month, but then 31 at the end of the second month, and so forth, increasing by $1 per month. So I'll pose the rhetorical question again, or a rhetorical question again, although you can answer it in the chat line if you like. What kind of cash flow do we have there? We've studied, is it annuity? Is it an arithmetic gradient, a geometric gradient, or a lump amount, a single amount of money? And that's what you need to know now to draw that properly. It's an arithmetic gradient. I have also geometric gradient up there, so I need to comment on this. Okay, what you need to know here is that if the increase per unit of time per interval is a flat amount, $1, $1, $1, $1 every time, then if that's the case, it is an arithmetic gradient. And you would show an arithmetic gradient by showing the base annuity upon which it is built. That would be this line here. And it is then shown, furthermore, as a straight line. Arithmetic gradients are done with a straight line. Geometrical gradients are done with a curve line. I'm not going to put a curve line on this one because it just messes it up. But if you want to follow the tip of my pen, it might look something like this. It would have a curve angling downwards. It could also be going upwards. It's always based, though, on in this case here, of an arithmetic gradient. It is always based on an annuity. There's a base annuity in place. And in this case, we know what that will be. It starts out here at $30 per month. And the gradient is, and it's denoted by a large G, it's $1 per month. And that comes directly from the question. Okay. Once again, the interest here is I is going to be equal to 12% compounded monthly. So again, with that word compounded in there, it's telling us that it is a nominal interest rate. We don't work with that, with the one exception where we talked about continuous compounding way back in chapter 2, that one event there. But when we have it this way, we will convert it with that formula just like before. I will be equal to R over M. This will be IS, a subperiod. It's equal to 12% over 12, because there's 12 months in the year. And that will be 1% per month. Okay. Now again, the gradient, arithmetic gradient, is monthly. It's built on an annuity, which is monthly. The interest rate is monthly. The timeline has to be monthly as well. Got to make sure you have compatibility of units when you do problems. So in the case of doing a arithmetic gradient, we will seek what's referred to as a total annuity. The total annuity is the base annuity plus the gradient built on top of it. So that formula, and you hopefully can recall this from the textbook, but it will be ATOT, TOT standing for total. And I think that's the notation they use in the book. and it's going to be equal to the base annuity, which they represent as A prime, plus the gradient onto the factor formula, which is, or onto the factor, which is A, what is the annuity? If we know G, the gradient, the interest rate, and we know the number of intervals or periods involved in the computation. Now this term here is referred to as the arithmetic gradient series factor. So they are published in our tables, providing, of course, we have the I and the N that we need. So once again, the first step here would be to put some values in here, and this would be 30. $30 is your base annuity from up here, plus the gradient. In this case, it's just $1, $1, onto, what is the annuity, what is the annuity? If we know the gradient, I is 1%, and N is 24. So I'm going to do it this way again. Not much we can do cleaning this up along the way, so these numbers will just stay as they are. 30 plus 1, which really is not needed, but anyways, what we have. And we go to the textbook, and we should, as Jonah is saying, excuse me, that was private. Sorry, Jonah. It's 11.2024, and that's correct. So 11.024. And if we do that little bit of arithmetic, we have 41.024. So that's the total annuity. So what we've effectively done is we've taken the gradient and added it to the base annuity to get a total annuity. But we have to appreciate at this moment, all we have is that annuity. We do not have the future value. We have to now convert that total annuity into a future value. So there's another step involved here. And what do we have? Well, we're looking for a future value. And what we have is an annuity. So the annuity here, just like part A now, different numbers, just like part A, what is F? Future value, if we know the annuity, I, and N. So the annuity we just calculated in this case, so it's going to be equal to 41.024. What is F? And this is notation stuff here. I is, I just need to check this. It's 12% compounded monthly as we calculated it up above. So it's going to be 1% because we're working at the monthly level. And the number of compounding periods, or the number of intervals, compounding intervals, is 24. So we will now do 41.024. We need that factor. And that factor, if you look it up, is 26.973. And if we multiply that together, you'd have that. Okay, now this one here, as I mentioned, this segment down here is the, we're using the arithmetic gradient factor. Here we're using the uniform series factor. However, what I tend to do, and I'm repeating myself, I know, but I tend to look these up in the table. I look for the column that is AGIN or FAIN, rather than remember the names and maybe get a little mixed up along the way. That's just how I do it. You can pivot from the name of the factor, not a problem. Okay. So if we were marking this question, you would have 1 mark for the cash flow diagram needed to convert to a subperiod. You're going to get a mark for that. And you're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4 for that. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4, 8. That question would be worth 10 marks on an exam using the rubric that I presented to you earlier today. Now, a question like this might also have one more associated with it. It might say, which is the better of the two investment plans options? And if that were asked, you'd have to make a decision, which one? Well, from the first one, it generated for us $1,078, call it $79. And in this case, we generated $1,106, even though the amount in the first case was $40 per month. This was only $30 per month, but the gradient factor changed that over 24 months. That's why this one will be higher. So what I might look for in that is to indicate which option. Is there a name in here? Probably not. No, I just have to keep it simple and say which option is the better option. Which of the two options is the better option? And you'd have to come up with a statement here saying which one. Well, clearly you would choose this one because you'd want the one that gives you the highest return. So I might expect an answer something like option B, call it by that if you like. Option B gives a higher return after 24 months and therefore the preferred choice, something to that effect. It gives the higher, or you could yield, you could put this number actually into the answer as well. I don't look for a lot of elaboration on it, but in one case or the other, this is pretty straightforward. I quite conceivably could add in, identify which option is the better investment. And you'd need to indicate which one in a short and to the point type of answer. That might include the actual numbers, but definitely has to indicate whether it's A or B. Okay. Yeah, there probably could be. I wouldn't mark you wrong if there isn't one. If there was nobody saw that question, it came to me, but the question is there a dollar sign on a total? There probably should be. There is a dollar sign here, but here probably wouldn't hurt to put it, but I don't normally, that won't cost you a mark if it's not on there. I suppose where it might cost you a mark is if you're not working with Canadian dollars. In other words, there are questions in here. One has a couple of questions that are pivoting around the euro. Others are around the currency denomination, I think, in South Africa, if I recall correctly. You may or may not encounter them as you prepare for the exam. But in those cases, you'd want to make sure that that you're identifying the money unit, if you will, as you go through it. So that takes care of 3.9 A and B. Oops. I want to turn our attention now maybe to 313. It's on my list next to do. Most of these questions we're doing are those that are identified in the asynchronous lectures as they were presented. This one here is kind of interesting, 313. Where am I here? Although the question doesn't call for it, I'm going to solve this one using 3 different methods. So I'm going to say we're dealing with here EOC 313. And we have a cash flow here. It says an investment pays $10,000 every 5 years, starting in year 7. So we need a timeline, and how long would the timeline be? Any thoughts on it? You want to tell me? I'll draw it out while you're thinking. This investment pays. So this is a receipt. It's giving money back to you, presumably. You've made an investment and it's returning you this amount of money. $10,000 every 5 years. But the first one does not occur until the 7th year. So this will run for 22 years, is what it will do. If you didn't give me that answer, just think it through a little bit. I see a couple of answers, but they were sent privately. Just want to check if others came in. So what we have here is, we'll draw this, or I'll drop it down here. So time 0 is here. And the way you would do this is that the first payment that is made back to you, we'll say, was $10,000 at the end of year 7. So time 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it will be $10,000. But then every 5 years after, $10,000 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This sometimes is the value of using graph paper. You don't have to, but I prefer you do. It allows you to maybe pull together some sort of scale to your work. Another 10,000 is done there. This was at the end of year 7, so this would be at the end of year 12. It's every 5 years. However, the first one begins at the end of year 7. So another 5 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is here. Another $10,000. And that would be at the end of year 17. And this one here, your last payment, is another $10,000 here. And that would be 5 more years down the road, 22. So these are all in years. Okay. So do we have an annuity here? And the answer to that is in part, but not in total. 5-year gap interval, 5 year, 5 years, 7 years. That destroys the overall annuity for the entire time of 0 to 22. So we can't treat all of that as an annuity. So in the book, they talk about ways to handle situations of money flow where it is not a perfect annuity. In one way, although a bit tedious if you have to do many of them, would be to treat each one of those elements within the cash flow as a separate entity. And that's how I think I'm going to approach the first one here. So method 1, you wouldn't get this, you would you would be given the option of, if you've got a question like this, which way to go, unless I specified which way to go. Okay, so let's take a look before I do that. I'm just going to put it up here to save some space, but I is equal to, because we typically need an interest rate, I in this case is 9%. Doesn't tell us that it's compounded. So that defaults out to be annual, whether it's an IS or an IE, it's an annual basis. So we're good with that for this one. So what I'm going to do here is solve this question by treating each of these cash flow elements as a separate standalone element, bringing each one, because the question says, I got to confirm that, how much is the investment worth today? Well, we're looking for, if it says today, a present value. If it had said at the end of 22 years, it would be a future value. Both can be worked, but this one question here says a present value. So, okay. So P is going to be equal to the future value onto what is P. I know F, I, and N. That's the series present worth factor. But we're dealing with it as an individual amount in this case. So what I'm going to do here is that the first P we will calculate, and I'm just going to use this number here because the first return, the first receipt we get is at the end of year 7. I'm just going to use a subscript here, 7. You could have called it A or B or C, whatever. It doesn't matter much. But just so that I don't lose track of where I'm working, I'm going to label the first P here 7. I'm going to bring that back to the present value here, times 0. So that would be $10,000 here. On to PF. I is 9%. N, you tell me, how much is N? N is 7 and 7. Yep. Just want to roll back on the chat line here. 7 is correct, by the way. You should be able to send, I just see the comment in there that I'm not sure what's happening. Something weird is going on. Okay, I'm not sure about that. Jonah, sorry if you're sending it privately and maybe you meant that or not, I don't know. But yes, you could bring it back to year 2 and treat what you have as an annuity and then bring that whole amount back to year 0, and it will work that way. And that is another method to solve this. So we'll take a look at that perhaps the next time around, if you will. Today, but not for this one. I want to keep each of these 3 methods separate, if you will. So we have this 7, and I'm going to, because of the repetitiveness of this, I'm going to work it this way here laterally. So we're going to have 10,000 here. What is the factor? If you look at your factor, it's going to be 0.54703. And you should look these up as well when you're reviewing these problems. Don't take it for granted that you're using the, don't take it for granted that you're, you know that how to work the tables. Go through that exercise every time. Don't just look at my number and say, oh yeah, I can get that. I'm sure of it, but be careful with that, please. So if we multiply that out, we're going to end up here with $5,470.30. But all we've done is brought this one investment back to here. So now we have to turn our attention to the second, I said investment, and I should have said return or receipt, back to zero. So we have to do the next one. So just for consistency here, I'm going to call that P12 because I'm working with this one right here at end of year 12. It's still only $10,000. That's okay. PF. Interest rate is not changing. How much is the time on this one? Anybody? 12. Yeah. So P would be 12, not P, N would be 12 here. So we're going to have 10. And if we turn our attention to the tables, you should be able to, from the present worth factor where I is 9 and N is 12, we should be able to get 3.35553. And if we multiply that out, it's $3,555.30. We're going to do the same thing for the next one, P, but I'm going to call it 17. As I mentioned, you could have just put a little A, B, C, and D here and called it PA, PB, PC, PD, if you like. It's just notation. So here again, the amount is $10,000. PF, the 9% won't change. That's constant throughout, but the N value will. And you're going to tell me, I hope that N will be 17 in this case. 10,000. And if you look that factor up, it should be 0.23107, which gives you a value of $2,310.78. And then finally, P22. 10,000. What is P? I know F. 9% won't change. And you're going to tell me in this case, I hope, that N is 22. So as you can sense by now, we're using the same table. It's always I equal 9. It's just that the N value is changing, and we extract it from the same column, that being the present worth factor column. So this will be equal to 10,000 onto the factor itself, which is 0.15018. And if we multiply that out, of course, it'll be $1,501.80. So we could now say the sum of all of those will be $12,838.10. And that should be the answer that's at the back of the book if you did it this way. Now, can it be done in different ways? And the answer to that is yes. So that will be method 1. I'm going to work method 2 as well, but we have to make some changes to this. And what I'm going to do here is say, let's convert it, this annuity here, all the way back to year 2. Because if we do that, And this is what that annuity would look like. I'm going to use a different color of pen here just to make the distinction. You should draw a separate diagram. I'm not going to do that here, but you should if you were asked to do it in this way that we're about to accomplish it. What we're going to do here is that we can, if we do this and come back 5 more years as, forget who, might have been Jonah, I can't remember, it's back in my chat line. But if we bring all of that together and bring it back, we could say here that we have an annuity. The problem is that it ends in year 22 and begins at year 2, because 5 years, 5 years, 5 years, 5 years are necessary to constitute the annuity. The amount is no problem. It's 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000. So we can kind of manipulate, to use the word, which I don't sometimes like, the data to solve it in this fashion. Because if we were to go with this method here, let me find it here. If we were to go, I'm sorry, right here. If we were to do this, what would happen here is that, let's say in year 27, there was another return of 10,000. And then in year 32, there'd be another one. And then in year, every 5 years, maybe for 25 of these things. So you'd have 25 of these calculations to do if that were the case. So this may not always be the most convenient way to do it. It works when you only have a couple or a handful, in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4 individual cash flow elements, if you will. But if there were 25 of these going way out here to the right somewhere, not impossible to do, but it would take a lot of computational time to do each one separately. So the idea maybe of using this and trying to set it up as an annuity would be a good way to avoid all of those not difficult, but routine calculations. So what we have to do here, though, is that if we're doing this, we know that the annual interest rate is 9%. If our interval is every 5 years, we need the interest rate for every 5 years. And we talked about this back in chapter 2 when we dealt with IE, if you will. And what we do here is we use this formula here. We can say here that IE, the effective interest rate, not for 1 year, but for a 5-year period, would be here. It will be, effective interest rate will be equal to 1 plus IS to the power of M minus 1. IS will be the annual rate. So we're moving from annual to whatever, in this case, 5 years. So what this formula would then look like, or the continuation of this formula, we're going to have bracket 1 plus, and the effective interest rate in this case, the sub-period interest rate in this case, we're going to say is 0.09 to the power of 5 minus 1. And what we're doing here is just really reframing the interest rate. We're saying we're going to call 9% per year the sub-period rate and expand it outward to cover 5 years. So when we do that, we should end up here, when you do that arithmetic, at 53.86%. Okay, so that's telling us here that the interest rate for a 5-year period, which is what we need to work with this annuity from year 2 through to year 22, is actually 53.86. And we know we don't have a table for that. So we know we're going to have to use prime formulas to solve this problem. So in this case here, I'm going to say here that the present value at year 2, I'm going to call it, right here, is going to be equal to the annuity onto what is the present value if I know the annuity, I and N. However, I know I here is going to be 53.86. I know I don't have a table for that, so I may as well take the next step right here and substitute in the prime formula, which is 1 plus I to the power of N minus 1 over I onto 1 plus I to the power of N. So if you were to look this up, and again, these formulas are all given to you at the back of the book, and you should have printed that off so you don't have to be thumbing through your book. You want to have your marking rubric. You want to have your formula sheets readily available so you don't waste time kind of thumbing through all your material looking for it or having to go online to get it. So we have that. A, in this annuity here from year 2 to year 22, the amount is $10,000. So we're good there. I'm just going to drop that down a little bit so it won't be quite so crowded. So the annuity here is going to be 10,000 onto 1 plus the interest, which will be 0.5386 to the power of N. N in this case here, how many intervals are there? Well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 intervals. So N is going to be 4. Those are your compounding intervals because we're working at a 5-year interval for the annuity. So there's 4 of them in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, each separated by 5 years. That's okay because our interest is at 5 years that we've calculated. So with that in mind, I'm going to put in here I down here, 0.5386 onto 1 plus 0.5386 to the power of N, and N in this case is 4. And if we work that all out, I'll put a closing bracket on here, we should come up with 15,253.86 is what you should come up with. Again, I encourage you to, and you're correct. Thank you for picking that up for me. -1 here, it's missed here. So you have to do that. Thanks, Fabian. So you need to calculate that here and to come up with this amount. But what do we have? Well, we're not back at time 0 now. What we've done is reduced this annuity running from year 2 to year 22 to a single amount at year 2. That's what we've done. It's present value at year 2. So we now have to bring it back 2 more years to get to today's present value. So we can call that P naught if you like. But P naught will be equal to future value because it's a single amount. We can do that. P, F, I, and N, which will be equal to, and in this case, I is going to be 9%. Because we're now back at annual amounts. We're bringing it back 1 year and then another year for a total of 2 in order to bring it all back, that one big lump sum back to time today, time 0. So N in this case will be 2.
Excuse me, could
Yep.
you move your paper up a little bit?
You bet I can. Yep. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, I'll just repeat some of that here. We're doing, we're bringing our lump sum amount. See if I can do both of these. Here we go, somewhat. We're using our, we calculated this annuity all the way back to a single amount at the end of year 2, but we have to bring it back to time 0. So we're back into using annual rates here. So the future value will be, or the present value at time 0 will be equal to the future value. That's that big one lump sum of money that we calculated here. And we're going to recognize that the interest rate now is back to annual because we're going to be dealing with bringing it back over 2 1-year periods. So 2 here, 9 there. And if we do that, we should have the amount 15,253.86 onto this factor, which is 0.84168, which is, when you do that arithmetic, 12,838.87. Just want to draw a line here, separate these methods. So we'll say, not surprisingly now, this number we just calculated should be the same within round off errors to the number we got on the first method. And it is within what, within 77 cents. So either method would suffice. This method will prove much more valuable than this method if there are a large number of these. Right here, we only have 4 of them, but say we had 25 of them. That would be a string of calculations all the way down, whereas here, this would not be any longer, just the numbers would change. So keep that in mind, please, as a way of doing this. Okay, so I want to look at this one here again one more time. So for your work, I'm just going to put out here, this will call this method 1. Down here, we'll call it method 2. And now let's take a look at method 3 to see if we can use yet another method in solving this. So this will be EOC.
Hey, Wayne,
Yeah,
do you mind putting the bottom part of that last page up just for 1 more minute?
absolutely. Never a problem. Just ask
Thank
as
you.
you've done. Yep. So can you, yeah, you can see it there. It's just at the very bottom there. Yeah.
Can you move it up a little higher because the icons are in the way?
Okay. Yeah.
Thank
How's
you.
that better? Yep. So as you're working with that, again, what we've done to solve it this way is we've converted the annual interest rate, called it a sub-period, to a 5-year effective interest rate, which allows us to configure that annuity of $10,000 every 5 years in the diagram using the blue line in the top of the page, at the top of the page.
Okay, that's good. Thanks.
You're very welcome. Okay, so now we'll move on here, and I'm going to put EOC 313 again. Put continued in here. And we'll deal here with method 3. Yet another method. So in this particular case, what we can do here is convert the annuity to an equivalent annual annuity. So I'm going to go back to my diagram here. Where am I here? This one here. I want to go back to my diagram here. And so the second method we did, we created annuity here using a 5-year interest rate. Alternatively, what we could do is break these annuities down from every 5 years to just 1 year to see what happens. So we would do that. I'll keep using this diagram to save a little time. I'm not going to write it out here, but we're using the same diagram, if you will, that we did for method 2. But what I'm going to do here, as I mentioned, just to repeat it, is I'm going to try to take these annuities amounts and break them from 5 years down to 1 year. So let's see how we can proceed in that case. The way to do this is to say, we'll take a look at year 7, or doesn't really matter. Could be year 12, 17, or 22. It doesn't matter. We're going to take any one of those years in that annuity and break it down from 5 years to what would be the equivalent annual annuity. And you cannot just simply divide by 5. That's a mistake people make, because you're ignoring interest in the calculations when you do that. Remember, the secret to maneuvering money is to factor in interest. So some people have in the past said, well, if this is $10,000 over 5 years, it must be $2,000 over every year. Wrong. Don't do that. You have to factor in interest. So what I'm going to do here is simply say, I want to look for an annuity, but I'm going to declare, I'm going to I'm going to identify this one payment here as a future amount. And what I'm going to do is break it into the 5 years that precede it. So we have here a future amount of $10,000 right here. So I'm going to say, what is the annuity? I'm looking for an annuity of 1 year. If I know a future value, what is that annuity? I know that future value if I know the interest rate and I know the number of intervals or periods. And I do. So F would be 10,000. Even though it's a part of the annuity, I'm just taking one element out of it, the $10,000, which is a single amount, whether it be this one, whether it be this one, or this one, or this one, or this one, doesn't matter. And I'm going to say, what is the annuity, which is I'm looking for is an annual one. If I know F, I, in this case, from the diagram above, annual amount is 9%. And the end value, anybody? What do you think? Yes, remind me later on that, and I'll do it when I conclude the question here, or maybe I can do it now, I guess. What I'm going to do here, just as a little diagram here, if we have this, I have the question on the chat line to do this, so I'm going to, maybe it is helpful to do it before I work the problem any further. You have your timeline that looks like this. And it starts out here and runs here. So we have 22 years here, year 2 is here, and we have a payment here for 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's kind of a selecting of that out of here. So that's what we have. So what I'm going to do here now is isolate on this. Anyone would work. So maybe to keep it a little simpler, I'll isolate on this payment right here, this term. Okay. What I'm going to do here is simply say, I have one amount here that I'm going to call a future amount, and I'm going to break it down into annual amounts here. Be 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I do that, then I can use 9% going forward. I don't have to change the interest. I'm basically converting a 5-year annuity down to a 1-year annuity. And I could do that for here and here and here. The good thing is it's the same calculation. Doesn't matter. You only have to do it once. And as long as you do it correctly, it applies throughout the entire 20 years from year 2 through to year 22. So only you have to do this once. So I don't know if that helps or not in terms of the breakdown here. So this has become this, if you will. So I'm breaking it down into the 5 years preceding that. And I do that by terming this to be a single amount to be broken down into an annuity of 5 years preceding that. Okay, I hope that helps. Good. So that's what we're doing there. Let me get some of these pencils out of the way here. And the end time, and again, I might have asked, I see Clive has answered it. I think that's the answer to this one, but it's 5. So I could say this will be 10,000 here. AF is notation, is the annuity if I know the future value. Whoops, I'm ahead of myself here. What I actually want to put in here is go to my tables. And if I go to the tables, and this would be the sinking fund factor. Again, I don't get too hung up on the names. What I'm doing is looking for the AFIN column. In the AFIN column, labeled the sinking fund factor, will give me a value here of 0.16709. And if I multiply that out, I get $1,670.90. Okay. So going back to my little diagram here, I have said that this $10,000 here, and if I break that down to the 5 years ahead of it, sorry, prior to it might be a better word, in getting this, each one of those is actually worth $1,670.90. So if you were just looking at this to explain it a little bit more, if I were to take that as an annuity and calculate what would its future value be in 5 years, I would end up with $10,000 to go in the other direction. But I wanted to take the 10,000 and break it into an annual annuity rather than a 5-year annuity. So with that having been done, I could do it for here, same thing, but I'm going to get the same number. It's got to have the same, it's going to be $10,000. The interest rate's the same. The end period is the same. The factor's the same. The arithmetic will be the same. So you only have to do it for one period out of that larger annuity of $10,000 every 5 years. Over 20 years, I can just do it for one segment of it and get the annual annuity for all 20 of these right there. So now that I have that, what I can do here is break that annuity down to a present value. So I'm going to go back to my parent diagram here, if you will. And maybe I should have drawn another diagram for this. I didn't, and maybe I should have. But what I'm going to have is 20 of these little 1-year annuities in here. 5 here, 5 here, 5 here, 5 here. Total of 20 of them. So I can now take those 20, or that annuity with 20 20 intervals in there of the amount we just calculated here, and bring it back to P2. So P2 will be a single amount. I have an annuity. What is P? I know A, I, and N. Well, we just calculated what the A value is, $1,670 and is that 90 cents? On to P A. I is 9%, because we're working at the annual level now, not the 5-year level. And N is, I've already mentioned this, but can you quickly tell me how large N will be? 20. Because we are bringing the smaller, we broke all of this larger annuity, 5 years, 10,000, down to 20 years at $1,670.90. But it spans 20 years. So N is 20. And if I go into my tables, I will get $1,670.90. The factor will be 9.1285. And if I multiply that out, I get 15,252.81. But again, I now have a single amount for that 20-year annuity, but it's only at year 2. So I want to bring it back 2 more years to bring it to today, because we were asked in the question, what is the present worth, present value of that cash flow of money? And leaving it at year 2 is still 2 years into our future. We need to bring it back to time 0. So P0, that will be, and it is a single amount, because it was a present value for year 2. We're going to have, that will become a future value, because we're again terming it as such relative to time 0. It's a future value of one amount of money, and it will be equal to what is P, we know F, I, and N. That will be 15,081 onto P, F, I is 9%. We're working at the annual level. And N in this case is, anybody? 2. So we'll just copy this number down here because we can't do much cleanup around it. But we'll go into our tables, pull out that factor here. I equal 9%, N equal 2, using the present worth factor column, or I prefer to say the PFIN column. You end up with a factor here of 0.84168, which gives us a value here of $12,837.99. In comparison, if I look at the previous work we did, we had 12,838.10. Down here we had 12,338.87, and here we have 12,837.99. The differences are due to round off in the factors, because we're only carrying 3, 4, 5, depending upon which column we took it out of. So if you were to carry this forward in a calculator, that although you may only be looking at 3 or 4 factors, behind the scenes you have 9 or 10 or 20 of them, I don't know, and therefore it would work out much closer. So the discrepancy, but when you look at it, this is there, this here's up to 80, where am I here, 87, looks like within 88 cents, all 3 numbers agree. So that's what we have there. Time-wise. So the next one that I'd like to do here, so we can make use of our time here. This question, which one do I have next? 317 is what I'm showing. .317 is a pretty short one, so let's do it. A little relief there, maybe. 317. It's about Godrich Automotives. It's abbreviated GA, wants to donate a vacant lot next door to its plant to the city for use as a public park and ball field. The city will accept only if GA will also donate enough funds to maintain the park indefinitely. So here's where you're going to be watching for certain words again in questions. Uh, 317. If you see words in there where the timeline is infinity, or that's expressed as indefinite or forever, we can calculate what's referred to as the present value, but it picks up a different name in that case, and that name is referred to as the capitalized value. Capitalized value, let's just take a look at this, and hopefully that comes out here in this. We're going to have a timeline, but it has no end value associated with it. So this n is not a it's not a question mark. We're setting it at, to use their word, indefinitely. That's going to be maintained indefinitely. So this will be infinity. Goes to infinity. And what we want to know here within that is the estimated maintenance cost, I didn't complete reading this, is $18,000 per year, and interest is at 7%. So how much must GA donate? So they're already donating the field, but the city or the RM, whatever you happen to have, also wants GA to donate some money to maintain it. Because if they don't, what would happen? Well, if they accept the land and make a ball diamond and a playground out of it, maintenance is going to be necessary. And if GA doesn't provide a perpetual fund for that, then who's going to have to pay for it? Well, in this case, what are we dealing with here? The city, we'll call it Brandon. I don't know, it doesn't matter. Brandon would have to pay for it, or the RM of Stonewall. I don't know if there is one named that or not, but the RM of, I'll say Alexander. That's one I know that exists. The RM of Alexandra, and they would have to pay for it. And where do they get it? Well, they get it through taxation. So if GA doesn't give the money, this is just talk around the question. Don't need it to answer the question. But if GA also donates the money, then there's no financial burden placed on the town of Brandon or the RM of Alexandra. So if that's the case, that would be better not to put a burden on them. See if, because what GA will do is they give them this amount of money to begin with, if they will. They'll put it into a bank account, earning hopefully 7%, and the maintenance will be paid out of that money year after year after year indefinitely. So what we have here is that there would be an annuity on this. The annuity will be and it will go on indefinitely as well. And it's going to be $18,000 per year. So that's the amount of a person's salary to maybe pick up the trash, paint the equipment, put up some fencing, men fencing, because there's going to be a ball diamond there and you don't want the people parking their lawn chairs out at second base, things like that. So you're going to have some fence to set up boundaries, but those things will wear out and wear down and they've got to be maintained. And the city estimates that's going to cost $18,000 in terms of salary for people to maintain it, as well as any products they may have to replace, fences, maybe a set of Mickey Mouse bleachers, who knows what might be there. But they've estimated it at 18,000. So in addition to getting the land from GA, they're going to ask GA for an amount of money that will yield this annuity year after year after year. So we'll go ahead and do that. But when you have that scenario, and in this case, N has become infinity. It's not that it's not unknown. Infinity is not a number. You probably know that, but it's a concept, but it just is out there. And for this, long-lived projects often can be termed as having an infinite life. For example, any highway they put on the ground, they don't expect the highway to last 3 years and then be done. It has a life expectancy that's infinite. So when you're doing questions, you might want to look for keywords. And some of the keywords I've noticed is indefinitely, forever, ongoing, never ending. Those are words I've seen in some of the questions. So when you see that word, you should turn your attention immediately to this formula. The present worth is equal to the annuity divided by the interest rate. That's the formula. That's in the formula sheets that you have. Just checking my time here. So if we work this a little further, we would have here 18,000 divided by the interest rate. Now these have to be in the same units. Fortunately, they are, because the interest rate, and I want to write that down here in the question, is 7%. So I equals 7%. It's not nominal. There's no compounding involved. It's just a flat 7%. So I is I. So this is 7%. So 0.07 will be equal to $257,000 when you do that arithmetic. So the town is going to ask GA to provide a lump sum amount, one time only, in addition to the land, to provide for maintenance over an infinite number of years into the future. So that would be the answer, present worth of that amount of money. This is not unlike when someone gives a bursary. Some of you probably have received these bursaries or awards from the college that are reflected in the field of program or the study that you're involved with. But, and I'm aware of some of them because I've been a party to some of them. They may donate what's referred to as a perpetual fund, same concept. They may give $10,000 to the college to invest into a perpetual fund. And that perpetual fund will generate interest every year. And that's what this amount of money will do. It's going to generate interest every year. But of course, that interest will be used to pay for the maintenance of $18,000 per year. So in some ways, this is not part of the question here, but in some ways we start out here and it's going to gain money by interest every, let's say, on an annual basis. And then at the end of the year, you have to pay that. It drops back down, but you're still left with your base amount. So it will start to look like this. The cash flow. I should have gone up there. My mistake. I'll put a cat, make that look smoother this way. So in essence, just like the bursaries that you may get or the awards you may get, the lump sum, the perpetual fund to begin with, your award is extracted from the interest that it earns in that 1 year. So in this case, you start out here with $257,000. Interest is earned, builds up. At the end of the year, though, they have to balance their books, pay their salaries to the person on an annual basis, of course, but you're actually getting probably checks every month or twice a month. And then at that point, it drops back down. So this amount here would be the 257 amount in your bank account. It grows, drops. It grows, drops. It grows, drops. This is the maintenance component that's being paid on an annual basis out. So that's where that comes in. So if you're working for an RM, and some of you may be as municipal engineers, quite possibly, or in municipal engineering technologists, and perhaps otherwise, if someone comes to you with a proposal that they're going to donate land to you for building something for the good of the community, you could be the hero of the day by saying, well, we have to go back to them and say, we need you also to set up a perpetual fund to cover our maintenance, because if you don't, we have to put that burden on the taxpayer. And if that's the case, we have to say no to your offer of land, because we can't raise taxes. It's just going to kill us if we do that. So you could become a bit of a local hero by bringing that up and mentioning that in addition to any parcel of land, whether they're already built with the diamond on it, the ball diamonds and the playgrounds or not, the bottom line is that you probably want to set up a perpetual fund with it as well, so that as time goes on, you'll always have a certain amount of money that will offset the cost of maintenance year by year by year as a matter of interest. That's sort of some of the history behind that. So they're asking in this, going back to this question here, they're asking in this case for GA to donate, call it $250,000 to create a perpetual fund, which will be used to pay the maintenance of $18,000 year over year over year into the far distant future, or however you want to word that. So that's what we have there, 317. Okay, let me just see here. Let's take a look at supplementary problem C, 3C. Now I have to grab that. It's up here somewhere. Okay, 3C. Supplier of lab equipment is looking at equipment which will cost $71,000, having a useful life of 5 years and a salvage value estimated at $8,000. If the cost of capital is 15% per year, what is the equivalent annual cost of purchasing the equipment? So you're having a lump sum, and 5 years down the road, you're going to start out. I worded that poorly. You start out by buying some equipment that's worth $71,000. 5 years later, you're going to salvage it and get $8,000 back, and your interest along the way is set at 15%. So what would that all be at an annual basis? So our cash flow diagram should look something like this. It's going to run for 5 years. So I'll just throw that in as 5 years. And the initial deposit here will be at time 0. You're buying this piece of equipment. $71,000. And after 5 years, you're going to get some money back on that investment in the range of $8,000. Is that what it says? Yes. Interest, again, is 15% per year. There's no reference there to compounding, so that is it. We can call that IS or we can call that IE, same thing. So let's take a look at this, and we're going to break it down into it and say, let's calculate the annual amount. So we've got an initial amount and an amount 5 years down the road, and what we want, and I'll show it on the diagram, it will make us, the effect of this cost, the combined effect of this will be an annuity. So that's our unknown. That's what we're seeking in this case. What would be the combined effect of a $71,000 purchase on day zero, but then salvaging it in 5 years for $8,000? What is that combined effect? So whenever you see that scenario, you should turn your attention to the cost recovery formula. And the cost recovery formula will give you an annuity. That annuity will be purchase price minus the salvage value, in brackets, that's important, multiplied by the capital recost, try that again, the capital recovery factor, which is AP, I and N. An important part of this formula, though, is that plus salvage value multiplied by interest is required. So that's your capital recovery formula. Purchase price, 71,000. Salvage value, is it 8,000? Yep. And it's AP, there's the annuity. If we know the present value, we know I, which is 15%, and N is the 5 years, 5. So we then have to add in the salvage value of 80,000 multiplied by the interest rate, 0.09. We can clean this up a little bit and also put in the factor. So this here will be 63,000. This factor, when you look it up,
Excuse me.
Yep.
Why do you have 9% at the end? Aren't we using a 15% interest rate?
And you're probably right on that. Yes, you are. Excellent. Don't know where the 9 came from in my mind. Probably my memory just messed up. Good observation, though. I apologize. Better?
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that, but I get ahead of myself sometimes and lose track of my numbers. Okay, so we have that. The factor itself, if you go to the tables, should be 0.29832 plus 15%, if you will, of 8,000 will leave you with $1,200. And if you do that arithmetic here, you should end up with 1,900. Try that again, $19,994 per year. So we've converted that initial cash layout for equipment with a recovery 5 years down the future into the future is equivalent to $19,994 per year. Now, if that piece of equipment makes you money, and this is where the comparison comes in here, or the decision comes in, because another part of this question, when you look at it, after you've done that, we've calculated the equivalent annual cost. So that's the equivalent annual cost of the initial 71,000 and the recovery of the salvage of 8,000. The equivalent annual cost is at $19,994. If the equipment produces extra profits of $23,000, is the purchase justified? And your answer is? I see a yes coming up. Any more yeses or nos? I think we can eliminate it to those two opportunities. Should we, is that a good deal or not? If that piece of equipment actually, another yes comes up. So not all of you are seeing these, I guess, because they're being sent privately. So we have some yeses that have come in, and that is the correct answer. So the answer would be yes, it's justified. The annual cost is $19,904, but the annual profits are $23,000. So you have, call it an earning, a saving, a profit of $3,000 per year for that equipment, because it's going to cost you so much per year as well, which is what we calculated. Now, if your annual return, I'll word that better, if the equipment produces extra profits of $15,000, what would be your answer? And you should tell me the answer would be no, it's not justified, because the equipment, that's right, it's no good. The equipment is costing you more than it will make you. And although you're totally within your rights to go ahead and buy it, but if you operate your company that way, you're probably going to go bankrupt quickly. Because after all, you're buying equipment that doesn't pay for itself on an annual basis. So that's some of the application of this sort of question, or this sort of course gives you. It gives you a way of trying to determine whether or not it was a good purchase or a bad purchase. Of course, if you return $20,000, it's on the borderline, if that were your extra profits. And they say extra because you've got other equipment earning you money as well. And I guess you could always make the decision, well, this is losing me money, but others are making me money, and I need them both anyway, so I'm still ahead of the game. And you can make that argument, but right now at this introductory level, we're just dealing with one piece of equipment to make the point, to follow the procedure. So you seem to have it there. At 11:30, is it today? You have your quiz. I have to open it up for you to see, which I'll do in 10 or 15 minutes. I like to take the time to do a quick review of my settings to make sure it's flowing properly. And then it'll be there, and I will be here. It's a 20, I think I have it set for 25 minutes and 2 minutes grace, I think. And then it'll close out on you. So don't get stuck or bogged down on one question. Do the ones you know to begin with. You can always go back and ponder over ones that take a little, not so much longer time, but you're just not sure of the answer. So most of these answers you should know from the top of your head if you've been doing your homework along the way, studying the theory. But I guess because of the way our situation is today with COVID, unlike the classroom, it's essentially an open book exam. You would not have that benefit in the classroom. You'd be doing this in the classroom, and you would be having to rely on your studies and what's in your head, not the textbook. So anyway, that's for another day, and you guys will be long graduated by the time that comes back. I've heard some pretty good rumors that we're going to be continuing remote delivery at least till the end of December. So this is not going to go away over the summer, it would appear. It's going to stay with us from our perspective of education. But food for thought, you guys don't have to worry about that. You'll be out working. Okay, any quick questions? Yes, there is a question. Yes, I do hold a lecture prior to the exam in all cases, but for your case, the answer is yes. So there will be a lecture next week before the exam, and we will continue to do questions. I prefer to do questions that you ask me for, because I don't want to lead you away from questions on the exam or lead you into questions on the exam. But if you don't give me any, I'll continue my pattern of sticking with completing these lectures here for the ones that are noted in the, what do they call it, the asynchronous lectures. There's questions that have been identified in there, so I would want to put that into the, if possible, questions we'll do next Monday morning. And we might also venture into chapter 4 questions as well, because we are studying that at this time as well. So work on chapter 4 after over the next week as well, but also prepare for your midterm exam, which will be inclusive of chapters 1, 2, and 3, but because they're all arithmetic, it all boils down to chapter 2 and 3 is what it all boils down to. And that's all we have. So I'm done here. And then you're on for your stuff come I'm going to stop sharing here, and I'm going to stop recording as well.